Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 yo, go, go, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day.
Hello guys, this is ItsJustOneGuy and I'm back here with another video. Now after the whole Unity debacle, what I planned to do was put my project over to Unreal and then Godot, but I ran into a bit of a hiccup. Now one of the reasons I made this series was to show people the actual reality of game development, and that sometimes you run into hiccups and development doesn't always go as smoothly as you planned it. Now what I was originally working on was a stat and ability system, which would basically cover character classes. I'll go over that in the next video, but while I was working on that, I realized that I had to update my UI system, and that's what I'm going to go over in this video. So I've never liked Unity's UI system ever since they switched from the GUI-based UI system to the new game object UI system. So it's always been kind of not good to work with, but it is better in some ways, but it's not better in other ways, because the GUI system used to work completely through programming, and now they use game objects that you have to manually place in the world. The good side of that is that you can easily see how your UI is going to look, and you can change it at a fly. Just give an example. So before, you couldn't really have all these 3D UIs, elements and stuff like that in Unity, because it worked through the GUI system, and you couldn't really place your UI. So it's kind of hard to get a good UI exactly the way you want it. The bad side of this is when you're creating menus, it's a lot more difficult to create a good menu because it's not working through code anymore. So this is what I've been working on. I've been upgrading my UI system so it works better with menus and stuff like that. The first goal was to get it to work with a controller. So now I don't need to use the mouse anymore. I can completely use a controller just to control my UI. If I exit this menu right here, I can go into my dev menus and completely use a controller just to control everything there. The second goal was to create prefabs of all my UI elements, specifically an infinite scrollable menu. If you've seen my project before, you know it didn't look this way. The third goal was to make this all fit on the screen and look exactly how I want it without weird stretching elements and stuff like that, because I plan to do a lot of game development and iteration from my phone. So I wanted these UI elements to be very clear, and I wanted them to work in a predictable manner. And while Unity has systems in place to help with this, none of those systems are really good to set this up, because let me just go into here and I'll show you. It is to note that Unity does have a system for automatically making the menus work with a controller, which is this right here. But that system isn't very good, and it isn't predictable, and it doesn't work the way you would expect it to work. So it's better if you use an explicit system like I do, and just set up everything exactly how you want it. That was the first hiccup with designing this system. The second thing I had to do, just reset everything, is create the infinite scrolling menus, because I wanted my buttons to be created dynamically. And this was a bit harder to do than it should be. And this is one of the pain points that I've been going through the past few months with Unity, because I could never create a menu like this, which could add buttons dynamically. And I'll show you that right here with this system. If I wanted to create a new attribute, just put test attribute. And if I create it, you can see I just dynamically created a button and the menu automatically resized itself. Now Unity does have tools to do this, but those tools, they just don't work. They don't work well. They have what do you call it? A vertical layout system that just, it doesn't work as well as you would like it to. And also, when you create prefab buttons, the menu won't stretch out longer when you to dynamically create the buttons. You have to program all that through code. And some of this I had to use GPT to do, just to figure out some of the math on it, and some of it I had to do myself. But what the end result is, I have a nice menu where I can create an infinite amount of buttons, and they just appear as they're supposed to, and the size of the buttons doesn't change, which was harder to do than it should be, frankly, because in the old system you could just do this easily and it all worked. But in this new UI system, it's very complicated to do basic things like this. But when creating an attribute system where I can create new attributes, it was necessary to create this sort of system right here. And this gets into another thing I want to talk about, which will make this project pretty hard to port. Stuff like this won't need to be ported into other game engines. It won't work in other game engines. So when I'm porting my project, all this work right here will be wasted, and I'll have to use that engine's UI system. So that's going to make porting very difficult. And while I don't like Unity's business practices, I think I put too much time and work into my project to really switch over. I'm still going to try to do it because my original plan was to switch over into Unreal and Godot and do a couple of tutorials on how it was going, because I've already started to switch over to Unreal. But the problem with that is it's just so much work and it's a different workflow. So I have to learn a completely new skill set. And that's the reason I wanted to put some of the tutorials up on how to work with Unreal and Godot, because there's not as many as Unity. And what I find is when something is highly technical and with a program like Unity or Godot or Unreal, they never have beginner-friendly tutorials. Like, the tutorials always assume you know what you're doing to a certain degree, where if you're changing workflow from something like Unity to Unreal, you're not going to know immediately how those systems work. And that's one of the things I wanted to go over in my next series of videos, which is switching from engine to engine. Because something as simple as setting up Unreal is very complicated if you're coming from Unity, where everything is just downloaded and works. And that's one of the great points of Unity, is that when you download Unity, everything works and it's very simple. That's one of the reasons I really don't want to change game engines, because for all of Unity's problems, one thing it does really well is you just download the engine, and for the most part, all of it works. It is simple to understand. There's no complicated points. Now, some of the technology might not be as good as I want it to be, but it is good enough where you can understand it and you can easily understand how it works. So this is basically everything I've been going through, and I'll just show you now that I can now just completely work with a controller through all of my menus, which is something that was very important to me, because in the future I hope to port some of these projects to a console. And personally, I like the controller over the keyboard, and before I had to use a keyboard and mouse for certain elements. One thing that's funny that I'll show you right now is the way Unity deals with input UI. No matter what you do, you have to hit enter each time before you can switch to another UI point, which is weird. I don't know why Unity does this, but it makes using a controller to move through these elements really weird. But there's no way to get past that. That's just the way the input UI works on Unity. But other than that, everything else is really good. It's just switching these menus over to the new system took a great deal of time. And that's one of the things I wanted to show with this tutorial series, that sometimes you'll run into unexpected things like this. But now, since I've dealt with it, I can move forward with a UI that's much smoother and better than before. And I know these visuals don't look too good, but one of the things that I wanted to do with this project was create basic visuals, because I can switch this style out at any time. But one thing I couldn't switch out was the fundamental way these menus work. But now I'm happy with everything that's created, because I can create dynamic menus that stretch on their own and create an infinite amount of buttons. And I can also do the same thing with tabs, drop downs, and everything like that, and it all just works the way I want it. Now, one thing I want to say is that I feel Unity should work like this right out of the box, and with the old system, Unity did work this way without the box. I mean, right out the box, excuse me, I misspoke for a second. But I do feel that Unity should work this way right out of the box. Another pain point was switching menus. Now, in the old system, in the GUI system, this was a lot easier because you were working with code, so you really didn't have to deal with a lot of this. But what I had to do to overcome this point is, when I'm switching menus, I just set up a UI button that automatically switched menus instead of calling it from here. One thing to note is that I do have this adding a listener to this button, so when you press this button, even though it doesn't have anything right here, because it sets it all up to code, you can only add one listener. That became a pain point when I'm doing something like entering, let's see, this menu right here, and things need to be set up in the menu. If you go to the button that is actually doing that, you'll see that I couldn't do that from code. I had to set that up manually with the buttons, and that's because for some odd reason I can't set up multiple listeners on a button through code. So that was a pain point to figure out, but in the end I did figure it out, and I created a couple of new scripts to deal with stuff like that. One script that really helped me out was this one right here, that is dealing with all the UI menu stuff. So I can deal with buttons, text, toggles, all this stuff right here, and I can make each one of my systems dynamic. Like if I go to an attribute and I look at it now, this menu, I can add as many buttons just to show as many things as I want. That was something I couldn't do before, because creating new text elements at runtime, Unity really doesn't like for you to do that. It doesn't like to stretch a scrollable menu out like that. You have to set all that up through code, and it's really complicated, and it has weird stretching issues and stuff like that. But now that I solved all that, I have a dynamic UI system that works exactly the way I want it. So after I finish my switching all these menus over, then I'll move on to start porting my project to other game engines. And the first thing I'm going to start with is Unreal. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. And if you're interested in anything I'm doing, or you just want to follow the channel, please like and subscribe, and check out my socials in the description down below.